Welcome and thank you. You must be curious. I'm curious why. Why would, if we put up a theme, would you want to? What drives you to be curious? Darren, can I ask you to push the buttons? Thank you. When we get there. Not now. Darren's dad said I have to give him a job if I see him. Now the PowerPoint, you can just push the next, please. When I ask, yeah. Okay. It's welcome. It's the same. The rise of Christianity. We did a poll and asked what would people want to hear, what would you want to talk about or hear, and this was one of the more popular themes. Is just to continue on, just to hear where the church was. Now, a lot of these things we know-ish, and it was interesting. It moved me when you actually go through the scholars and the people that really checked out what it was all about. Really, and they tell stories that you don't hear every day that casts an interesting picture on the history, especially from we're in a space where we look back on history and we have this idea because of what media tells us, or maybe somewhere someone said something, or maybe you saw a documentary or whatever. So it might be accurate, or it might very much not be at all accurate. So I think the cool thing is, on the one side, is just to clear up a bit. What's the actual story? Hi, Ian. Welcome. What's the actual story of Christianity's past? And if we say Christianity's past, I think the more accurate description would be the church's past. Because what happened to Christianity and to the church in some spaces weren't always the same thing. The second thing is, I want to pick up where Uncle John left off after Gnosticism, is how the church now reacted. What happened to the church when they have to start dealing with these heresies? Obviously, as we know, history tends to repeat itself. And I think a lot of what we see in the history of the church, we tend to see today again. We tend to recognize like, oh, that's why we are where we are. That's why things look the way they do. And as soon as we're aware of that, we can start nitpicking to some extent, but really just seeing the patterns, really recognizing what should we be giving attention to and what doesn't matter as much. So it's really a way to prioritize our efforts to some extent as well. Okay, clarify history and try to see the patterns of the world today. It helps us recognize what's going on. The same kind of thing the biblical authors would do when they would write about stuff that happened and then give some kind of a perspective on what probably will happen again. So it's literally just, let's draw the timeline and see what we see. Okay, so that's pretty much what we're going to do. And then the topics, if you just go through, I found it quite cool that they all started to see it. I thought that was useful. And then saw that we first maybe just need to lay a kind of a foundation to talk about Christendom. And I'm hoping you're wondering, why in the world is he saying it like that? Maybe you've heard the term before, so we just want to clarify what's going on there. And that gives us a kind of a backdrop to all of the other events to make them make sense. The creeds, which we use so often, is just a short intro to where they came from. And the fascinating thing there is the creeds that unite us got created amongst war. There was so much conflict to create and get to a place of unity. So that's quite a fascinating read. And then Catholicism, which we all know semi-well, to some extent, and maybe just hide from. I know some people, when people came here and they saw us say in the Apostles' Creed, the one Catholic Church. I'm like, oh no, nope, I'm out. Can't be part of what's happening here. And so people get the word wrong, and I think they also think about the Catholic Church in, again, media ways, or the way that Hollywood portray it. So that would be also cool to clear up a bit. And then what's traditionally known as schisms rather than chasms, which is synonyms. But the sad thing there is when the church started splitting because of theological issues. So we're going to get into that a bit. And then the Crusades. What happened there? Why was that a good idea? And what went wrong and what went right? And why can't we do that again? So, but we'll get there when we get there. For tonight, I'm going to jump into the rise, the first few years, 300, of the church into the 2nd century, 100 AD and beyond, where certain things happened that built this monster that started ruling ancient times. So we're just going to get into that first stepping stones of the church a little ways after Christ, and then the church fathers, and then that little space we're going to spend some time on now. Cool. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this space. Just a moment where we can come and be together and just listen and see all that happened, all that transpired. The stuff that made the church who she is and was back then. All the lessons learned and everything that built up and brought your church to a place where a lot of beautiful things happened, a lot of good things happened, but also very, very unhealthy habits and structures that corrupted and broke the witness of the church in the world. And this is the history that we sit with today, that we look back on, and we see that this is the journey that we're on still. And we need to recognize and see what you were busy with, and it'll help us see what you are busy with now. So thank you, Lord, for making it possible for us to explore our past in order for us to more clearly see our future. In your name, amen. Sorry, thank you. Hey. Okay. Christendom. I read a book. Still want to write a book. I read a book, and the author said, so we live in a world of postmodernism. And I said, yeah, I've heard that before. And we live in a world of post-relativism. Like, oh, that's interesting. I'll explore that a bit. And the author said, we live in a world post-Christendom. My thought was, what? So I read a little more, obviously, because that's what you do with the book. And the author explained that there used to be a time where the church ruled. There used to be a time where the church won. And I would just to build a bridge between where the church fathers and the persecuted church, our previous journeys, church was in a difficult space, really, really difficult space, until the victorious church, this church that won. What happened there? So we're just going to fill in that space a bit. And then it's interesting to start realizing then, as this author exclaimed, is that era is past. So we're going to just describe what that was like and what that's all about, and then we'll make some comments about where we are today. So, in the face of Gnosticism and other heresies, Uncle John helped us understand what that was all about. So there was very intricate stuff that came into the church, and obviously the church had to react. And in that time, she was left with three things. You can give us the next slide, please, Darren, thanks. A creed, a canon, an organization. So that was the time when they came together and said, okay, we need to organize what we believe together. The church was scattered, loosely connected to some extent, and then got to a place where they were properly, solidly amalgamated and said, we are one against all of the outside. And that's what persecution does. Now, it unites people, especially people that feel they stand for something more important than, greater than whatever the enemy is imposing. If the enemy comes in and says, this is the new way, the people who believe in their way says, no, this is not the new way, we will stick to our way. If the new way is better, the locals say, cool, we shall assimilate and go with you. Christians said, whatever Rome is bringing is not what we are eating. We're not going to fall into that. And every empire after that. But for the most part, Rome was the ruling. And we're looking at the 300 years of the church's suffering in that years of persecution. Now, we heard about the church fathers, and we heard about a bunch of influences that came in and helped the church really understand who she is, what she's about, and reinterpret and revisit everything that Jesus gave, everything that Paul gave, and the church flourished, and the creeds are the fruit of that. The canon referring to the Old Testament, which was available at that time, and the New Testament that formally formed and was finalized, as in this is our New Testament. So like we do today, if in crisis, we refer to the Word. That was more and more available, not just letters floating around or old scriptures. It was not a physical book by that stage yet, but there was a definite, these are the scriptures that we refer to, and obviously that gave them a framework to work within, and that united them. That said, okay, you and you and you and you and me, we believe in these, and that unites us. That makes us one. So more and more there's unity formed, and the church said, okay, we need to obviously and more naturally start organizing. And that happened as it goes. Human beings come together and we start saying, you make the food, you bring the drinks, you have the wood, we can braai. It's natural. It just happens when we come together. We start organizing and making sense of how do we live and move together. So I quickly want to throw a few terms at you that helps us see the development of these stages. Next slide, please. Thanks, Darren. So presbyters, you know well. This is the foundation of our church. A Greek word for elders. Those are the terms that was used in the New Testament. Elders are the ones that Paul went around and said, okay, we now need elders. And you'll see throughout the New Testament that organization develops. They first started with just love Jesus and care for one another. If you read Acts, it was fine. And then here by Act 7, we start saying, ooh, we're running into walls a bit. Let's appoint deacons and elders. And by Timothy and Titus, Paul is saying, okay, these are the structures. So that developed over time, because we then, for the word overseer, where we got bishop, we have episkopos. You might know the Episcopal Church. That would be the way that the Methodist, the Church of England, these types of churches has been, and still today to some extent, is governed, is by the Episcopal way of doing. So just as the elders grew in authority and started, being able to tell, like we do now. I mean, I have the position now. I am able to tell you to don't, stop, go please, go, stay away, attend. It gives me authority, especially if people start listening. I mean, I was appointed by Paul, so you must mean something to someone. So, and naturally, there's still a human element there that said, okay, one of you needs to be the elder, and the rest can just be elders. And we came up with terms like the highest among equals, with these types of ways to try and explain that we're on the same level, but we're not. And I think of, is it Orwell's Pigs? That all animals were made equal, some just more equal than others. Now, so it's something in us that says, I'd like to be above you. And to me, if I read through the historical, the archives, I see this thing popping up. So the bishops then started being the rulers of the elders, and you start having overseers of areas, and it's a natural flow. And the monarch is the Greek word for a lone ruler. That would be there can only be one, whoever was a Highlander fan. And then the areas, it was interesting, the country around, so churches would be in a city that we planted, and the countryside around it would be known as a diocese, which is where we got that word. And then I found this very interesting, is the people, the heathens in the countryside, they're not the Christians in the city, the heathens out there. The Latin word for people in the countryside is the paganis. So obviously they became the pagans. So today we hear that word and we think it's this specific group of people. No, they had their weird practices. I mean, people on farms do. They do things differently. And they were known as the pagans eventually. That they worship other gods? Yeah. So the term is semi the same today. It's not like we have a misunderstanding of the term. I just think it's interesting how it was more localized. To we're the ones in the city, they're the ones out there. And then people would come to the city, they'd be converted and find Christianity, and it would become this cool community. And then the countryside, the people, the Christians there, would then become the diocese. And the rulers of the diocese, you'd have your monarchical diocese, monarchical bishops, and your diocesan bishops. So it all just, structure happens. If you leave it alone for too long, it just starts developing. And by then they started saying, okay, you have these, for the Gnostics and the Montanists and all these other heresies, they formed their own small churches. but we are the one true church. Now, there was I think that's the next slide, if you please. Cyprian was a bishop in Carthage, like an English word there. And he said this, he wrote this: there is one God and Christ is one, and there is one church and one chair. And with chair, he meant one authority. There's one position of authority. He who is not in the church of Christ is not a Christian. He can no longer have God as his father who has not the church for his mother. There is no salvation outside the church. The church is based on the unity of the bishops. The bishops is in the church and the church is in the bishop. If anyone is not with the bishop, he is not in the church. So you can see already the development of this is us and you on the outside is not part of us. And this is, we're 100, 200 years after Christ now. It did not take us long to distort Jesus' message of let everyone in. Jesus went to the Samaritans who said, and I mean, you can imagine his disciples, those are the enemies, what are you doing? Jesus went to the sick and the lepers. I mean, don't go near them, they're the bad guys, they're the outsiders. And Jesus said, no, I'm not here for the healthy people, I'm here for the sick. What do we do? Yes, we're here for the Christians, God's people. Let's gather them together. If you're not in here, you're not a part of it. There's no way for you to know God at all on the outside. Paul actually said in Romans 1:10, 1:20, where was that? People don't need the actual faith or the religion or all of it. They just need nature. They have no excuse not to love God. They have nature around them. They can know God through nature alone. So Paul was very adamant, well, there's no need to have all this structure. You can just look at a tree and you should be able to be open and find God, the true God. So it's interesting to see the development, because what happened next was, I think, an intensifying of this interesting story. By 306 years after Christ, 306 AD, Constantine becomes emperor over Britain, Gaul, and Spain. And obviously, the other emperor, who was, I think that was west. So that emperor Maxentius was emperor over the other part of the Roman Empire. And obviously, as power goes, we'd want all of it. And they found one another at a battle over what they call the Milvian Bridge. And Maxentius' troops were way more, and Constantine's troops was not as much. And there's a popular legend going around, during the night, Constantine knew this is not going to go well. I'm probably going to lose my part of the empire. Because there was this interesting dynamic where the soldiers would, just, okay, this is our new empire. And the rest of the people just had to go along with it. And they had the battle. But before they got there, Constantine got this. Now, this is, I read the one and I read the other. There's a lot of opinions going around. Because Constantine apparently, I think that's in the next picture. If you can show us the next one. Had this epiphany, had this vision of a cross above the sun, as the sun was setting the night before the battle. And he got this message, hoc signo vinces, in this sign conquer. Now the sign that Rome wore on the shields at that stage was the eagle, the majestic, powerful eagle. And now the sign of the cross was his vision, was this moment he had. And the next day, he won the battle. And he realized and recognized, did the Christians, God help me win? And he converted and he became Christian. And because he won, he was now emperor. And that gave him the power to help Christianity, or to at least put Christianity back on the map, where Christianity was a oppressed, suffering, persecuted faith movement, a people. This emperor now said, not so anymore. You are now in the face of the law, okay, and equal with all the others. Not eradicating all the other pagan religions, all the other, but he was originally a follower of Mithra, the Persian sun god, and it's one of the writers say he was a follower of the sun god, and then he became a follower of God's son. Well done. So he converted and was now a Christian, although his lifestyle did not show as much. So historians would rather, or afterwards, say Christianity was a very cool tool at the time. Maybe there was enough Christians to support. Maybe it was a political move. So there's conspiracy. But as the story goes, he was converted and he believed Christ helped him win. And Christianity got a seat amongst the big boys. Was it a good thing? Well, Christianity won the events. Christianity then, they referred to Christianity as the victorious religion. It was oppressed and small. It was not educated people. For 300 years, it was this back alley movement, hiding, being persecuted, frustrating, going against all the norms. I mean, the normal way of living and being is the gods say, have fun with one another, enjoy one another's bodies. And the Christians come along and say, nope, only within the marriage. So they were just going against everything that was cool and fun and enjoyable. And they won. So I can imagine someone like, oh, goodness, now I have to listen to these weirdos. Imagine the parliament meetings. Now there's a bunch of Christians that has a say and a vote. Ugh. So Christianity won in terms of secular terms. It did good. Can we ascribe that to God? A lot of people do. A big turning point for Christianity. I mean, the one was Stephen stoned in Jerusalem. We read about that in Acts. And the Christians in Jerusalem, it wasn't on a lacquer foot. So they were expelled to some extent. And then a later big turn, obviously, Paul planting churches and the churches, spreading far and wide. And then the third big move was this moment. So in the next slide, at the Edict of Milan. Oh, that's just the interesting. They used to have the eagle and then they changed it to, that's the Greek rather, the r sound, and the X is the sound. So Christos was the symbol that they used, started using on the shields, and Constantine then won. His successor was not a follower of Christ. He said he was, but as soon as he took over, he wanted to, find out quickly, I can't remember his name now, but he wanted to get heathenism and all of that back into the game, and he badmouthed Christianity, and he didn't have any real place or a way to get rid of it. Julian, the apostate, was his name. So he tried to get rid of Christianity and failed. And the story goes, this historian writes, the story goes, the dying man, he was wounded in battle. Later, the new emperor who tried to get rid of Christianity after Constantine, Julian, and by a leg wound, he was wounded and bleeding out on the battlefield. And the story goes, the dying man caught some of the spurting blood in his hand, threw it toward the heaven, and exclaimed, "So thou hast conquered after all, Galilean." But you had to recognize, so Jesus won because he couldn't manage to get rid of Christianity in the time of his rule. It was too strong. Because Constantine gave her money, Constantine gave her power, gave her position, gave her favor, and the church, for all practical reasons, traded. The church really gave up a lot of her, I want to say personality, character, for positions of power and for influence. So this is Iron Man. Iron Man is part of the Marvel universe. Marvel was created, it's a comic book franchise that was started in the 30s, 40s, 50s, especially Captain America and these types of stories. Superman was the first. He's of the DC inclination. Those are the bad guys. Marvel that's the good comics, the quality comics. And later in recent years, they started making movies, and it has been taking over the world. And they even coined the new term, we now have superhero fatigue. There's so many movies and so many stories about superheroes, we're tired of it. What's my point? Marvel is an empire. It is this big, big company that Disney bought, and Disney is now this monster that creates stories that shapes people's lives, literally helps people think about relationships, dreaming, wish upon a star. Cinderella, all these stories, it really shapes our culture, our way of interacting with one another. We use references in our talking based on these stories. And it is shaping how we think in the world. It's just fiction. Because this empire exists, and this is the argument that I want to put to you. Give me the next slide, please. At the Edict of Milan, Christianity was given equality before the law of the empire, and it rose to power. It really won, but it became a brand. So a lot of people jumped in because there was military and social and political gain. A lot of people jumped into Christianity because it was the new cool thing. It was the cooler product on the market. And Christianity got strong. But Jesus says that is not where you want to be. You do not want to be on top of the food chain. Because those who are first, coming last. That's Jesus' whole point. So you could argue that if the Christians seeing what's happening should have said, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. But who would? Let's be honest. If the emperor comes along and says, to us as ministers, listen, you've been struggling to build churches. Let's, give you a palace or two and run your church from there with a never-ending supply of money and food for the poor. You can do the church's work until you're blue in your face. We would say, at last, Lord, you have provided. So it's interesting to discern, if you look through history, is it God's work? Or did humans just play the same game they've been playing forever? That I cannot say. That we can debate about and pray about for hours and hours. But if we look back on history, what followed wasn't always pretty. A lot of good happened. A lot of change happened. So the other side of the coin, I'm doom and glooming now. The other side of that coin. Dominion is written by Tom Holland, a secular historian. He started exploring the Roman. He was fascinated with the Roman Empire. Kept seeing how disgusting they were. Really, really disgusting people. You need to get rid of your daughter, just leave them. And the Christians would find all these orphans because they weren't, I need a proper son to take up my legacy. A strong son. And this one, he's soft and plays chess. Throw him out on the junkyard, and the Christians would come along and make all these orphans get them together and build big buildings and house them. And so the Romans were really awful people. And Tom Holland started seeing that, okay, wait a minute, something changed in society if we compare where we are today with that. And he started tracing. And he argues that the one biggest influence in the world today is Christianity. Western culture exists because of Christianity, with all her flaws. But the fact that the church won shaped history, it changed the world. No matter what angle you look at it, it really just changed everything. Roman rule, which had a system, changed over time. And the way you look at the law, social justice, morals, name it. Christianity just had an influence in all of it. More so than other philosophies, but other philosophies as well. So today we have this interesting mengelmoes of we're all in this together, but Christianity, they argue, had the biggest influence. Last few thoughts. Give us the next slide, please. That wasn't the last one. I think that was the last one. Christendom, then, as the Merriam-Webster defines it, the dictionary is plainly defined as the part of the world in which Christianity prevails. So Christendom refers more to the area where Christianity is the dominant religion. And literally, I think dominant is the key word there. Christendom refers to Christianity that rules, where Christ started a movement where people of God serve. So the argument today that the scholars and the thinkers have is that Christendom is over now. We used to live in a town where Christianity was the only accepted way to be. Not the case anymore. We used to go to schools where Christianity was the only accepted way to be. We used to, on a Sunday, not be able to go to shops. Constantine started that. He said, there shall not be commercial exercises on Sundays because it is now a Christian world. We grew up in Christian worlds, for most cases. Ethiopia as well, no? For the most part. It's Christian spaces, Christian influences. It's against the walls. It's in this education system. It's on the TV. It's on the radio. Most people have a natural Christian. South Africa still, just saw new stats the other day, thinks of herself, or 84% of South Africans think of themselves as Christian. Constantine introduced, I would say, cultural Christianity. Something that the atheists today, some of the atheists, Richard Dawkins, for example, says he loves the church, he loves hymns, he loves concerts. He just can't stand this Jesus hoi polloi stuff. People think of Christianity as a brand. It is fictional. It's very cool. It's really influential. It's very nice. It helped me figure out a few stuff. Still just a brand. If it doesn't help me anymore, I'll jump to the other one. It's not a faith in a real person. It's a useful culture. It has, some benefits. So the question is, if we look at this history, we have to ask ourselves, am I a Christian culturally, or am I convicted that Christ is God? I think a lot of people lost that sense when Christianity won. I'm going to leave us there. Oh, maybe just this last thing. The other big thing that happened there that we're going to keep referring to in the coming weeks is the marriage, this amalgamation between state and church, which you'd know is also a lacquer topic that has been throwing off everything for years and years and years. So that's also where Christianity came up and said, hi, state, ruling government. And the government said, how are you? You are pretty and you are influential. I think I shall keep you close. And Christianity said, yes, you should see us convince people to do horrific things. You should see us convince people to die for what they believe in. And the government said, yes, I shall keep you in my back pocket. And it's been like that ever since. And we can tell story after country after country that Christianity has ruled and has done horrific things. And Christianity got the blame. Not the state, the faith. And now people stay away from the church because she is the one who did all of this. And people get blind to all the beauty and all the wonderful things that Christ is doing because she's blinded by what the church is doing. So the story for the most part gets scary. But next week with the creeds, we'll explore the wonderful stuff that happened on this journey. It's just absolutely beautiful how this shaped in between everything. And you can see God's hand in it all. Okay, I think I'm going to leave us there, and then we'll journey on together. Leave you with the last quote. Muggeridge in 1980 in a book, that's a surname, I just said, that's someone's surname, said the following: Christ founded Christianity, Constantine founded Christendom. Amen. Any comments, questions, contributions, if you've heard anything?
Yeah. Just to add, people can correct me if I haven't got the 100% correct as far as the history goes, is that Constantine, that's the empire was split at that time with the Roman Empire was split with Constantine and Marcus, as you said. And if you follow Paul's journey, it was mostly in Asia Minor, you would call it. And then, and that's where the battle that Janko mentioned between Marcus and Marcus was actually emperor of the West, and the other way around, yes, and Constantine, emperor in the East. And that's where you got the name of Constantinople.
Yeah, where the city came from.
Today, Istanbul, obviously. And it was his mother who actually took to Christianity first. And
Yeah, that's also what I've read.
Previously, in that many women almost ran to Christianity because they were given an equal defended position in the faith of Christianity.
They were honored, yeah.
Yes, they were honored, exactly. Whereas in the Roman Empire, they were not. And that influenced Constantine's mindset quite.
Being more open to, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, the influence of a mother.
Yes. Yes, I just want to mention that aspect as a little bit more of a background to Christendom. Yes.
And I think that there's a lot of richness there. That I mean, all of these stories, it's human beings who're just trying to do their best. And in the long run, we see how God is using these elements along the way.
And if you get an opportunity to visit Istanbul, and the tours will take you to the mosques, the Blue Mosque and the Hagia Sophia Mosque and so on. They were actually originally Christian churches, which through the Byzantine era and whatever were changed to become mosques of Islam.
And it's interesting to see if we get there, how they put the cement over, they try to cover up the images, and then they scratch it down again, and then the Muslims put up their banners over it again. So it's a fascinating cover up the whole time. Great.
Yeah, just two things. You don't know, you basically can't see in the heart of this Constantine emperor. I personally think it's cynical. I think he was a military man and he was a politician. That tells you everything you need to know. And
Or you want to assume.
yeah, I assume correctly though. The thing is, but that doesn't matter. That doesn't really matter because God is going to use all things
In spite of,
Okay. The second thing, so 1313, 300 odd years after the Lord was born. Okay. So it was 270 odd years or 280 odd years after the crucifixion of Christ. From shortly after the crucifixion of Christ, we have our first martyr, Stephen, gets cut with the stones. Okay. And since then, the Christians were taking hits all the way to 313. Okay.
That sounds like what, 2-3 generations?
That's
man?
8 generations.
8.
Yeah, 8. It's 8 generations.
That's true. Okay.
I don't know your maths.
No.
That's 8.
How do we define generation again?
40.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. That's what they, 40 years in the desert, a generation. That's how we work it. So, correct. So it's 8 generations. It's not a small amount of time. Despite those clubs, and we heard those clubs in the humanity with Andre about the disciples getting clubbed.
The lions and
that lady in Leon and her 7 sons. What a gawky and terrible deaths. Despite all of that, the church is prospering. The church is growing. It wasn't this, before the Edict of Milan, Christian church wasn't this insignificant church. It had prospered to a point. It was going to prosper more because of the law. Don't get me wrong. But it wasn't, but it still decided it all through that whole persecution and the second persecution and the third persecution of Christians, they still flourished. And that should give us hope. Because if we ever persecuted, and we're not persecuted, I don't think, if we ever persecuted, the faith is going to prosper.
And to me, that's also true if we think about churches. How much of a sparkle, a panic does it become for church people to keep their congregations alive? We need to protect what we have here because God's not going to be able to. No, you can really breathe. God's going to do the work. I think that's the balance to try and see is what's God doing here and what's humans doing all across the moral line, but along the lines of what God is busy with. And that's a beautiful picture in the end. But yeah, like we said, to have some clarity to where it came from and where it might be going. Anything else? Uncle John, please.
Constantine, in my view, one of the most enigmatic leaders in the Christian church. Very difficult to sort of weigh him up. You've got this pagan who becomes a ruler and imposes state rule, but on the other hand, he opens up the door for the Christian faith to become legitimate. The one thing I know is that the church at the time loved him. They were very grateful to him to end the persecutions.
And who wouldn't be, yeah.
Even Constantine himself, I think he was a genuine Christian by the end of his life. He was only baptized on his death, but he committed himself early and he ran huge risks doing that. He wasn't like the later, or like some of the earlier Caesars were. He wasn't in complete control of the country. He had a lot of enemies. There were a lot of people, even his own son was opposed to him. And there were various sort of conspiracies to try and get rid of him. So I think in an overall sense, one's got to sort of admire him just as a leader to take the part of the Christian people who had up till that stage been despised and usually coming from the sort of, bottom level of society. So I think he was genuine and it turned everything around. But he had a rough ride of it during his life. It wasn't easy for him. I respect him very highly for who he was and for what he did.
And I think that's the fascinating dynamics at the end. If you just scroll through these pages to see the humans, normal human beings, do they really mean it? Does our actions determine what we mean and not? Can we be okay with one another in spite of our actions and just allow the Lord to work without, shunning and discuss it as the church got to that point of it's us and then so yeah, that's the cool thing of just seeing how the Lord is busy with his church and us being able to just, I want to not necessarily just sit back for the ride, be a part of it, but really just be aware of what he's doing, be sensitive to his move, and then be okay with one another tripping and falling over one another on the way there, wherever he's going. Cool. It's 1:45. I love you and leave you. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this time together. Thank you for just a moment to come and sit and be stimulated by your story, the church story, and be challenged by hearing what has happened. There's so much more to explore and so many layers beneath all of these, like we uncovered now. And even these are the perspectives of historians that look back and even translate these stories in their own ways. So in the end, Lord, we trust you and we know that you are busy with your church. And we thank you for the ability to look back, like the Hebrews writer says, on this great many witnesses that came before us and see their stories and hear their interactions with you and with the world around them. And then come back to today and look around ourselves and look at ourselves and say, Lord, yes, we're probably getting up to the same sort of nonsense. So we ask that you guide us all the more clearly and all the more loudly so that we can follow you and you alone. Amen.